Chapter 16. Sig West's forehead had beaded up with sweat as the hot brands continued to burn and scar the skin on his back. He knew it had been some time since the second ring was complete, but what really worried him was the welfare of his friends. He hoped that no one had died in the attempt to save him, especially since it was unlikely to succeed at this point. He smiled as he thought of each of them. Daniel Young, with his scowling tone but deep concern for the preservation of life, had been his first ally in the quest for the divine keys. He was slightly relieved in the thought that he would not have to endure being scolded for not taking better care of his precious life. Kirana Sepharvaim, the snow leopard. She had always tried so hard not to care, but she could never help herself. She did care. And she was a good person underneath the layers of emotional restraint she piled on herself. Jonathan Knight had started out so weak and helpless, and had so quickly matured. Sig was proud of his accomplishments, and he hoped that he would be successful in winning Kirana's heart. Ulysses Lizard Carter had come so far from being a pawn of Felix Light. He was a loyal and dedicated scout. His skills had saved their group countless times. He decided he would miss the air quote gesture too. Lucas Flynn was the most intelligent person Sig had ever met. Being young, Sig wondered how smart he would become with experience and time. He was certain that he would be successful in bringing the demon worshippers that had killed his family to justice. Victor Lee was new to their group, but Sig was grateful for the balance and reason that he brought. Sig decided that it was probably not a coincidence that they began actually finding divine keys when someone with a level head and a balanced view joined their group. He wondered how they stuck together before Victor came. Jennifer Cedar was a mystery to Sig. He decided that she was probably only sticking around because Victor Lee was there, but one way or the other, she had helped them out of a difficult situation with Felix Light. Sig closed his eyes as another brand sizzled against his back. He would miss his friends. "One more brand," said the leader as he exchanged the one he had used for one that an acolyte handed him. "One more and the third ring will be complete. It's time for you to make your choice. Will you give us the key of origins, or will you give us your blood?" "I'm obviously not going to give you the key of origins, but I do have something I want to give you," said Sig with a tired expression on his face. The leader sighed softly. "An appeal to pity, perhaps?" asked the leader. "A beg for mercy?" The leader knelt next to Sig to emphasize his point. "Do you want to look me in the eye and give me a conscience?" Sig lifted his head and looked beneath the hood of the leader. The tattoos on his chin were visible underneath his hood, and the light of the fire reflected faintly on his eyes. Sig spit in the leader's face and burst out laughing. The leader wiped his face angrily and held the brand over Sig's back. "Die!" shouted the leader. Suddenly the door crashed open, and Sig felt the brand scrape the skin of his back as something threw it free of the leader's grip. The other acolytes in the room began screaming in pain. He tried to pull his head around so that he could see what was going on, but his bonds prevented his head from turning enough. After a few moments, he caught a glimpse of a familiar white cloak and a boot-clad foot flying toward the demon worshipper that had nearly taken his life. "Snow leopard," whispered Sig with a smile. The leader flew back and fell on the ground. Jonathan sliced through Sig's bonds and helped him up as Kirana held the fire demon worshipper leader against the wall with the point of her sword. She flipped the hood of the leader's cloak back, revealing the tattooed face of a frightened man. Sweat had beaded up on his forehead, and his lips were trembling with fear. As weak as Sig felt, he stood triumphantly over the leader. "I'm sorry," shrieked the leader. "Please don't hurt me. I didn't mean to do those things." Kirana furrowed her brow in anger. Jonathan shook his head in disgust. After a moment, Sig burst out laughing again. Everyone looked at him with confusion. "Hang on," said Sig. "You didn't mean to press hot brands against my back for the past several hours?" Sig laughed heartily. Jonathan could not help but smile at Sig's statement. Kirana maintained her look of disdain for the leader. Sig motioned to Kirana and Jonathan to step back. As they did, Sig ripped the black key off of the chain that had been around the leader's neck and tossed it away. "Please," cried the leader desperately. Tears poured down his cheeks. Sig looked at him with intensity and pulled him up. He pressed him against the wall. Sig pulled his fist back, preparing to strike the leader. The leader turned away and closed his eyes as he sobbed. Sig slapped the wall behind the leader and burst out laughing again. Jonathan and Kirana looked at one another in confusion. "What exactly did you do to him?" demanded Kirana. "I didn't do anything to him," sobbed the leader. "You mean except for pressing hot brands on his back," corrected Jonathan. "Right," admitted the leader, "except that." Sig finally stopped laughing and caught his breath. "All right," said Sig, "get out of here." "What?" asked the leader in disbelief. "You're free to go," said Sig with a smile. Thank you," said the leader as he rushed out the door. Kirana grabbed Sig's arm. "Why did you let him go?" shouted Kirana. "Why not?" asked Sig with a smile. "He can't hurt us anymore. Hey, where are the others?" "We had a little hold-up at a bunker in the center of the fortress," said Jonathan. "They should be recovering there." "Great!" exclaimed Sig. "Let's go." "Sig!" shouted Kirana angrily. "How can you just let him get away with that? You know what fire demon worshippers do. You know what they did to you and what they did to me." Sig smiled calmly at Kirana. "Because I believe in mercy," said Sig in a more serious voice. "I believe in redemption. That's what the divine keys are all about. This world has been begging for mercy ever since the destroyer came. It is pleading to be redeemed from the curse that came on that dark day. And that is what I intend to find for it. Why hunt demon worshippers when we could hunt demons themselves?" Kirana lowered her head, ashamed of her desire for vengeance. She remembered when Sig had first asked her that question. As if reading her mind, Sig continued. "Do you remember when we first met, Kirana?" asked Sig. "It was right here, in this room." Kirana nodded. "You've come a long way since then," said Sig. "Have I?" asked Kirana coldly. "You have," said Sig. "It doesn't feel like it," said Kirana. "If you were that same hurt girl that I first met, then Jonathan wouldn't have such a big crush on you," said Sig with a smile. Jonathan and Kirana blushed and looked at the ground awkwardly. Sig laughed loudly. "Let's get the others," said Sig at last. After treading through the snow for some time, they arrived at the large metal bunker. There were a few acolyte bodies scattered about, and their moist blood reflected the light of the moons in the sky. As Sig pulled the large swinging door toward him, he was immediately greeted by Lucas. "Sig!" shouted Lucas. He ran up and embraced him, although he was only tall enough to wrap his arms around Sig's stomach. Sig laughed and rubbed Lucas's hair. Victor and Lizard soon emerged from the bunker, holding their heads in discomfort. They both smiled with satisfaction when they saw Sig standing in front of them. "They made it," said Victor with relief. "Good to see you, Sig," said Lizard with air quotes. Sig laughed loudly. Lucas turned to Kirana. "Kirana," he said, "do you still have the key?" Kirana nodded and pulled the dusty key from her pocket. "A new key?" said Sig in surprise. "Who would have known that one was hidden here?" "I didn't," said Kirana flatly. "Well, Lucas," said Sig in suspense, "which is it?" "It must be yours, Sig," said Kirana as she handed it to him. Sig smiled widely as Kirana dropped the key into his large palm. Nothing happened, although they watched intently for a few moments, hoping that something might happen. "It's yours, Kirana," said Lucas. "What?" said Kirana in shock. Sig laughed and dropped it back into Kirana's hand. Nothing happened. Isn't it supposed to glow or something? Asked Kirana in confusion. Well, that's what the others have done so far, said Lucas, but we really don't know a lot about what allows one person to use a key and others not to be able to. What I can tell you is that you are holding the Heaven's Sword key, and that you are supposed to keep it. Heaven's Sword? Gasped Kirana. Jonathan smiled widely. I had a feeling that the ultimate weapon would be intended for you, Kirana, said Jonathan. Kirana turned to him with a look of confusion. So did I, Snow Leopard, said Sig in a reassuring voice. After a pause, Kirana put the key back into her pocket. Don't worry, Kirana, said Lucas. We'll figure it out. So, said Sig, changing the subject, where are Daniel and Jennifer? They are hopefully recovering outside the fortress, said Victor. Jennifer used her key to help us travel quickly. Sig laughed loudly. Victor gave him a look of confusion. I don't understand, said Victor. I just think it's ironic that the woman who always worries about being late was just in time, said Sig. Any later and you would have found my corpse. He laughed again. Victor feigned a smile, but he did not find the comment very funny. Sig turned to Kirana. See, he said, I told you today was going to be a good day. In spite of herself, Kirana let out a soft laugh. Seeing her smile put everyone a bit more at ease. Of course, that was before they learned that Daniel and Jennifer had been picked up by Row 82 and sold to an augment slave farm.